recording.
We are.
Oh, nice. No pressure. No pressure, of course.
All right, we'll just dive right in. We're happy to be here to share God's story, our story, and how, I love that He loves us. That He loves us. And I'm just wrecked. And so I've been wrecked since having to write this out. Oh yeah, that's what God did. So I'll just start. So my name is Jane Kim. We've been married for 21 years. Wow. Yeah. We have 2 kids, Emily 18 and David 16. And it is a pleasure to be parents of teenagers. It was scary, but we really enjoy it. And I do think it's because we have a good marriage. All right, I'll start.
We're still learning.
So, before marriage, I was born in South Korea as the first of 3 kids. My parents became Christians when they immigrated to the States, and faith was a very important part of our family. I remember my parents being either busy with running their business or at church, so I was taught to work hard and go to church. That was pretty much it. I grew up in a very traditional, conservative, Korean Christian home, which meant I didn't hear my parents tell me they loved me. I was just supposed to know. Oh, I hear that. Thank you. Nothing. Yes. They weren't very affectionate, so hugging for a long time, even into my adulthood, was awkward. So I'm still learning to hug. Look at that, Don knows. Yeah, that's really awkward. Is it time to hug or is it not?
Always.
Always time to hug, okay. And so being immigrants, they were very fearful of the unknown. There was always, oh, this is Korean culture and that's American culture. Ooh, stay away. So a lot of times growing up, I would hear a lot of no's. No, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. Just in case I would get in with the wrong people. So my life was about school and church, and nothing outside of that. And all I knew about Jesus, though, was that He died for my sins so that I could go to heaven. And now I had a ticket into heaven, and they told me that He wouldn't take that back. That's basically all I knew. So once I got into college, I found freedom. And I decided I was going to take full advantage of this freedom. But the good Christian girl in me felt I had to have a talk with God. I knew that if I stayed in the church, I'd probably end up being dragged into being a children's Sunday school teacher. And I could picture myself coming in with a hangover and trying to teach Sunday school. I'm like, I don't think I want to be that hypocritical. So I wanted to have fun. I hadn't had any. This was college. I was free. My parents weren't there. And I didn't want to feel guilty. So I told God, I have my ticket into heaven. I'm going to go have some fun, and I'll see you later. That's what I did. I spent all my weekends at clubs, drinking, meeting guys. I had not had a boyfriend up until then, so I learned how to flirt and look to men to feel the deep longing to be known and loved that I didn't even know was there until then. So yeah, my parents, they're not very affectionate. They're not very affectionate with their words or physically. So there was a big absence. So this was dormant until I went to college and I was on my own. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I have this hunger. I want to be seen. I want to be loved. And so this hunger wouldn't go away. And so I started dating a lot of guys. I thought that was where I would find it. At least that's the closest I got to feeling that love that I wanted. And so I ended up dating a lot of guys. I slept with a lot of guys, and I was hoping that one of them would be the one. Then I met a guy, not this guy. I was in love. Yeah. I was in love. I got married to the other guy. I was happy. And a year into our marriage, I received a phone call. It was a girl on the other side of the line telling me she had had an affair with my then husband. I confronted him, he confirmed it, and I was in total shock. I thought we were happy. I didn't know where this had come from. So I would ask, what happened? How did we get here? Did I do something wrong? And on his side, it was total silence or just an apology. I'm sorry. And a couple of months in, I'm still trying to find out. And then he says one day, how many times do I have to apologize? And that just sort of brought everything to a standstill for me. And I thought, okay, I'm dealing with a guy who doesn't want to talk. And he doesn't want to, I don't know how we got in this mess, and unless we figure it out, we're gonna stay in this mess. You can't just shove it under the bed or in the closet and pretend it didn't happen. And so I was done. So I stuffed everything I owned into my car and I drove to my parents' home. I was done. Came home, I filed for divorce, and I tried to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. But it was at this time that I found Jesus through my parents. I was that prodigal son. I had left home to have my fun, and the results were heartbreaking. But they were like the father in that story. They opened their arms, they received me, there was no condemnation, and they restored me to my identity as their daughter. And that was so restorative to me. And because of them, I was able to move forward in my life without any shame. And I slowly began walking towards God. And I began attending church again, because if you live in my house, my parents' house, you go to church. That's just what happens on Sunday. And one day my cousin, who was with us, invited me to hang out with her friends at church. And that's where I met John.
All right, my turn. Mine's pretty long because I had more issues. So I grew up in Korea until the age of 14, and then my family moved to Chicago for a better life. As for me, I never knew who God was growing up in Korea. I've never heard of some guy named Jesus. I vaguely remember going to a church once for some event, maybe during Christmas for a show and free food. Still, the name Jesus never entered my mind. My memory in Korea was bitter and sweet because I hated schoolwork, but I really enjoyed the time with my friends. As a child, I didn't pay too much attention to what my parents did, but one thing that really stuck with me was that I hated when my father come home from work drunk. In Korean working culture, it was normal to work a grueling 10 to 12 hours and then have stress-relieving gathering with their fellow co-workers to let off some steam and have some fun to forget what just happened that day at work. And sometimes the cycle continued day after day. As a child, I never liked how drunk people behaved. I remember being in a deep sleep and my father being very loud and waking me up, and whatever he was saying didn't make any sense. I felt anxious and scared that it might turn into a night of arguing between my mom and father. Fast forward to when I was 14 years old, my family moved to Chicago for a better life, the land of opportunity. I had to learn new language and culture. My parents had more difficult time adjusting, and everything felt like an obstacle for them. They struggled to learn English, the culture, and they worked long hours at a physical demanding job. My father again turned to alcohol to deal with his feeling of being lost, tired, and purposeless. Now, as a Christian looking back, I can see that my father lost his identity. And a lot of men got their identity from where they work and their position at work. When those things are taken away or shaken, men start to wonder, who am I and what am I doing here on earth? So despite of my family's difficulties, some good came from those years. A missionary regularly visited my high school, and I got to know him very well, and he led me to accept Christ as my Savior. I was fascinated by the Bible stories. I was hungry for knowledge of the Bible. Through the missionary's recommendation, I was accepted to Christian private university in Longview, Texas. I joined the Christian fraternity at the university, and their house verse was Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your path straight. Who knew this verse would be tested during our marriage? And after graduating from there, I found a job here in Dallas, Texas area, and met my wife, Jane.
All right, marriage. We got married in the spring of 2000. I remember my wedding day. It was beautiful and sunny. I felt God smiling down on us. I had found a good Christian man, someone I had fun with, someone who I purposely showed all my ugly side, my past, my messy room. I told him I don't clean, I don't cook. And he said, that's okay. And that was my insecurity, because I didn't want him to later tell me, I didn't know this who you were. You're not who I thought you were. This is not who I married. And so I showed him all my ugliness. And during like the 6 months we dated, we broke up twice. That's because I was testing and making sure, are you sure you want to stay with me? Because I can't have someone leave me again. So he just stayed. He stayed. And so to this day, I just call him my anchor. Because he just stays the course. And so I had finally found someone who knew me and loved me. So God brought John to be Jesus to me again, like my parents were. He fully accepted me the way I was, and he restored my identity to another deeper level. And from that point on, I knew God was with me. My ashes had turned into beauty because of him. And I remember soon after getting married, sitting at our dining room table in our first apartment, telling God that he's going to have to somehow make me fall in love with him if I was going to be able to do this Christian thing, which was like reading the Bible, praying, going to church regularly. I don't like doing this, but so far you've shown yourself to be good to me. And so I think I'm going to turn my face towards you so that you can do whatever you need to do so that that happens, so that I can fall in love with you. And all my doing will come out of the love and not out of duty. And so that's all I did. I turned my face towards him and said, okay, whatever you want to do.
So meanwhile, the year 2000, let me tell you my marriage story. The year 2000, that's when I married Jane. The first 2 years were great. We were the best of best friends ever. The job was good. Everything that we planned was coming along okay. As we planned, our firstborn came into the world, and we were a step closer to American dream. We had a big house, a child, and a dog. And then a new challenge emerged with the newborn and big bills to keep up. The economy decided to go south. Suddenly, no job to go to, and no way for us to pay the bills. And eventually, we lost everything within a few months. After so many months, I finally landed a new job with a pay cut. As I was working, I decided to start a side business, just in case anything like this happened again. So I wanted to secure and control my finance on my own. Eventually, I quit my full-time job and decided to jump into business full-time. Of course, being a good Christian, I prayed to God saying, bless this business so that I can bless others. Later, I found out that just because you have a good intention, that doesn't mean your plan is aligned with what God has planned for you. This was a very long learning process. The next 6-7 years was a nightmare. Running a business was extremely difficult, and the financial difficulty never went away. Some months, the business took everything, and my family was left with nothing to survive. Sometimes the electricity got cut off, car payments got behind, and creditors were constantly bugging me, stress after stress. See, I didn't know at this time, but according to Jane, I was in a depression because I never had that kind of thing before, right? So I didn't know what it was. But I didn't want to talk about the business, and most of the time I just wanted to sleep, to forget the struggle. If Jane asked me anything about money or business, I saw that as a threat to my pride and potentially leading up to an argument that I hated. So to my frustration with situation, I started to question God's intention. I thought He was going to bless my business and grant me success. And since that wasn't happening, I got angry toward God and ultimately distanced myself. Whenever Jane brought the subject of my relationship with God, I was quick to be angry and drew clear lines saying my relationship with God is just between me and God, and she had nothing to do with it.
We argued about that one. Even while we were writing this out. I remember when you said that.
It's really funny that looking back, I realized how easy for us to put on face in the church among other believers, pretend that nothing was really going on. Talk about transition.
Yes. So as I turned my face towards God, He blessed me with friends that were passionate about Him. And I was reading books, listening to sermons, just trying to get a hold of as much as I could about God. And what they told me was that God was good. And that is what I held on to during our financial struggles. My thinking was, God is all powerful. He could, in a blink of an eye, change this whole situation. So there must be a reason. He's decided not to. So I knew John was doing his best, but things were just not working out. There was nothing he could do. And so I looked to God as our provider and not John. So my prayer was, Lord, if this is my lot in life, to live paycheck to paycheck, hoping the lights won't go out, then you need to help me figure out how to be content and joyful. Because you said in Psalm 16:11, you will make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. I need joy. My kids need me to have joy, not frustration and anger. My husband is falling apart and doesn't need my negativity. I don't want just peace. I want something beyond peace. And to me, that was joy. And so I pursued joy. And as I pursued joy, I got God. He revealed to me His goodness, His peace, His love, His wisdom, His joy. I learned that joy comes when you fully surrender and trust God. I recently did a study on emotional literacy, and the researchers said that love is when you feel trust and joy. And I found that very interesting because I started this journey with God asking for love, and He took me on this journey of learning what trust was. Trust Him in the midst of all the difficulty. And then I believe Holy Spirit put that in my heart to pursue joy, not peace, but joy. And to hear that that's what love is. Trust and joy. When you feel trust and joy, that's love. And so God is faithful. God is faithful to answer those little prayers.
But my depression continued. I'm no longer excited about my business. I was on autopilot. The 7 years of struggle and stress, Jane finally convinced me to attend a Christian conference with some families from our church. During one of the worship service, I noticed everyone around me was worshiping God, and I could see the peace on their face. And I thought to myself, I used to have that peace. What happened? There I opened my heart to God and asked, God, I want that peace back in my life. Now I see that even during our years of struggle, you kept the roof over us, and we never went hungry. Now I see that you are the God who provides. So I was thinking, it took me 7 years to understand that God is the provider. And there is more to learn about Him. I need to start lesson right now. So I asked God, I asked God what I need to learn next. And his answer was to ask about his love. To me, that was a very strange answer, because I already knew John 3:16. What more is there, right? But I pressed on by requesting God to teach me about his love. A few months went by. During a prayer night at church, God came and answered my request in a radical way. In my mind, I was holding a nail and a hammer to crucify someone on the tree. Just before I hammer a nail through someone's hand, I looked to the side, and there it was, Jesus. I was immediately surrounded by overwhelming guilt. Ooh, this part always gets me. I couldn't even say, I'm sorry, God. I was wrecked. Finally, I gathered myself and about to say, I'm sorry, God. There was a small voice in my heart saying, John, I already forgave you. After all these years. Come on.
His
Come on.
love. His
Here I
shipwreck
knew
is.
exactly what this was about. It was God's love for me.
Amen. So, that was, I think for me, it was staying my course with God that helped me to, that was his stuff. He was working with God on that and giving God space and trust to work on John. My job was to work on me and make sure that I was connected to God. I stayed connected. My faith in him didn't falter, that it only grew, and that my love and my trust for God only grew during this time. And he, as long as I stayed focused, as long as I kept my face towards him, he was faithful to do what he needed to do to keep me in that space. And so I came out of that season fully in love with God. And I remember in a small group, like, oh, you know, I can say yes to a lot of things, but I don't think I can say yes to missions. I don't think I can. I'm afraid of being sent to Africa or somewhere. But then through that season, I gave God a blank check, meaning he could ask for anything of me, and I would give him my wholehearted yes. Plus, I banked on Ephesians 3:20, and I expected that I would receive from God, who is able, through his mighty power at work within me, to accomplish infinitely more than I might ask or think. And so I also trusted Matthew 6:33, to seek first the kingdom of God, and everything else would be added, and whatever that would look like. And I felt, well, God, I don't know what that looks like, but I'm sure you'll tell me. And so I gave him my yes, my full yes, whatever you want to do.
So after my experience, my life was completely wrecked in a good way. I wanted to spend more time in the Word. I wanted to fast so that I can get more in tune with God. My relationship dynamic with Jane also took an effect. Sometimes we argue. God always nudged me to do something about it, and I had to obey because I was in love with God more than Jane. I was so hungry for God. Whenever Jane suggested going to some seminar, prayer meeting, or conference, I was there, fully absorbing what God had to say. Whenever he talked about God, and whenever we talked about God and hear other people's testimony about God, Jane and I, we were all fired up. I have to say God brought us much closer through discovering who he was. But all that wasn't enough. Jane, being spiritually advanced than I am, sensed that something big was coming to our family. So, to make a long story short, we answered the call to sell everything and become missionary. A family driven by God's plan. During our time in the mission field, Jen and I learned to work together as a team to fulfill God's plan for us and the people who God entrusted to us. We found excitement in how God spoke to us individually, but when we get together and shared, it was amazing to find out how he spoke the very same thing. We found the joy in serving God, who is gentle, thoughtful, caring, protecting, providing, loving, and fun. So I guess our last word for you guys, those of you thinking about marriage, marry Jesus first. Tell him about your mate. Ask him about this season. What I need to learn about him. Go deep in his characters and nature. Fall in love with him. And for those of you already married, do the same thing what I just mentioned, plus talk with your spouse. Find out what God is saying to your spouse. Dream God's dream together.
I think it's been really fun to have purpose with John, that we're going towards something together. When I don't know what we're doing, it feels like I don't know my place. But when I am fully aware of what God is calling us to, I know where I should stand, and then I know how to value the peace that John brings. Missions where we were constantly on top of each other, like ministry work was 24/7, and we had to do it as a team. And that taught me how to value John. I need him. And until I felt that I needed him, because a lot of times I felt I can do so much without him. He is dragging me down. I was like, oh God, help me. But then he humbled me. He's like, you're not going anywhere without him. You need him. And it was in those places where we were doing ministry together that I'm like, oh dang, I do need him. He is the perfect person for me. And that the two of us, we are a power couple. Without him, I am nothing. Without me, he can't go too far either.
I'm glad this is on recording. Thank you.
Thank you.